Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Post Show podcast for the Pensky podcast. We just got done talking about Prey, another P word. Excellent.
Now we got 3PS, baby. Pensky podcast Post Show.
Now we got the patron comments, the pop filter on this microphone working overtime, earning that Patreon keep for this content. This is where we talk about some random bullshit after we talk about the Star Trek episode. Then we're going to start doing that now. Clay, how are you?
I'm good. I don't sound good, but I otherwise feel good for the most part. I didn't know the human body could produce so much mucus. It's disgusting.
Are you still congested, or your throat's not just like dry and scratchy?
It's a little bit of both. It's everything. It's like I'm not, I don't feel like I have a cold. I just don't have a voice. But it's just a lot of like hawking stuff up, which is lovely.
Yeah, we're a couple weeks away from it, but the kids got strep, and then we had the stomach bug in the house over February vacation, but everyone's back now. I sound terrific. I've never felt better.
You do.
In the spring,
yeah,
the birds are chirping in the morning. Everything's coming up west here.
I've brought my own distortion for this one. I sound very cool. I sound like a Kinks album from the 60s.
Listen, people buy microphones and run effects boards and stuff to get that kind of gritty voice. And
it's true.
You're just born with it. So we'll go to our first comment or question right here. It says, you're forced to go on a 7-day Star Trek cruise. On what day do you commit suicide? I've never been on a cruise. Have you ever been on a cruise?
I have not. They don't seem very appealing to me.
No.
And
talk about stomach viruses.
Yeah, seriously. And one of those types of like themed cruises seems even less appealing.
Yeah.
I've seen some, I don't know, the Disney one seems kind of cool, even though apparently that costs like $5,000 a ticket or something. It seems very expensive. But I remember
if you can't have sex, I think the cruise loses a lot of its luster. Like,
is that a rule?
I think so. I don't think I'm interested in being married and going on a cruise. I don't think it's... And I understand this is set up as a Star Trek question, but yeah. I think my answer would depend on how sexy of a Star Trek... How sexy of a cruise is this? Or is this a Star Trek... Is this the Will Shatner SNL sketch about a Star Trek cruise? Or is this my fantasy version of what a Star Trek cruise could be?
Yes. Where it's well, see, in my head, I think the disconnect is between me and people who've actually gone on cruises. Because when I think of a cruise, I think of like people sitting on the deck of a boat from like the early 1900s, slowly going down the Nile or something. Whereas what they really are is like floating resorts, right?
Yeah.
They're gigantic and, But I don't like.
I think of it as MTV's Grind on a boat, basically, and I think that. But like in my fantasy, when I get there and I take my shirt off, I'm just ripped. Like there's just there's no fat people. There's no like horrible ugliness on this. It's just like a pristine version of what a cruise could be, and I know that's not the case. But
I remember, the themed ones I find. I just hope the people, the celebrities and stuff who do those get paid really well. Yeah. I remember Sean was telling me he's like, they're doing this Comic-Con cruise. I know a few people are going. I was thinking about doing it. And I was like, why? It's like doing a comic convention where you cannot leave.
Yeah, you can't.
You cannot get away from anybody.
Yeah. And with like. I think that's probably what would cause me to commit suicide on the earlier side. It would be it's bad enough to be stuck on the boat, but to be stuck on a boat with a bunch of people who are all just talking about the one thing that's happening, you'd be like,
every table you go to
escape it.
At dinner is people arguing about,
Janeway
season 3 versus season 8 or whatever.
I would make it the one day. I would find the first day to be kind of novel. I would wake up the next morning and halfway through my Eggs Benedict, I'd be like, I think I want to go home now. And if I can't see the shoreline, I'm just going to take a header off the edge of the boat and see what happens.
How many Ferengi-themed corned beef and hash plates can you eat?
All the chefs are dressed as Riker making that horrible egg dish that he made in that TNG thing.
Maybe they're all dressed as Neelix. I would go for that.
Yeah. I wouldn't last very long. I'd make it 2 days, I think, on a Star Trek cruise. We had, it's just too much Star Trek. We had the top and worst TOS episode videos that I make. Occasionally the algorithm on YouTube picks them up, and I can tell that it's been picked up because you get a bunch of comments all of a sudden out of nowhere. But I imagine the cruise is filled with the people who are commenting on that video, and those people are like the worst scum of the earth that have ever existed. And
we love every one of you.
They'd be paying the $5,000 a day to go on this Star Trek cruise, and it would be the worst thing that's ever happened. Anything else about cruises? I don't think so.
No.
If you had to go on a cruise, where would you want to go? Would you want to go to the Caribbean, or would you do like the Alaska cruise?
I think the Alaska one sounds pretty cool. I know someone who did that, and they really liked it. So
it'd be nice to look at things that are kind of like the Bahamas are pretty, but it's just flat islands and stuff like that. But to go and see mountains and things would be kind of neat on a cruise ship. And you don't have to be in shape because you're wearing a sweater the whole time.
True.
You just wear your sweater. Anything else? There's no other questions right here. Did you have anything else going on? I guess my only thing to talk about is I'm doing a book challenge with Amy this year, and it's each month you have to read like a themed book. I think I mentioned this in the context of I have to read a graphic novel at some point. But the first one I read was you have to reread a book that you read when you were younger, and you might have a different perspective on. And I read Catcher in the Rye, and that was good. That was my favorite book in high school, and it still holds up, I think, today. Although you get a different perspective on Holden as you're older.
I was interested if you were going to say that, because I remember hearing a podcast where somebody was talking about that, and they said that's a really interesting one to read at different points in your life, because when you're young, you identify with Holden, and when you're older, you identify with everybody else who hates Holden.
Yeah. I think it's definitely, when you're younger, you definitely agree with him a lot more. I think you see his sadness much more when you're older. I think you just get like, it's much more obvious that he's kind of faking. I think it's that thing when you're a kid, you kind of take the unreliable narrator at their word a lot of the time. You don't really understand why they wouldn't be telling the truth.
Yeah.
And it's good. It's such a short read too, but it's interesting. And I think you get a lot out of it.
I saw recently a tweet. I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was one of those things where it's like on social media, you kind of forget A, how old you are, and B, how young potentially the people on the other end of it are.
Yeah.
And I have to assume this was a tweet from a younger person who basically had just discovered the concept of the unreliable narrator. Yeah. And like how interesting it would be. And they described like the thing about that's so interesting is you can use it to purposely deceive and to misdirect your audience. And that's a very powerful tool. It's like, yeah, that's what it's fucking for, man. Like welcome to sophomore high school English class, my friend.
Yeah. The being young is wasted on the youth, or whatever they say.
That's something that I never appreciated when I was younger, but now that I'm older, I really have a lot more sympathy for like my dad. Anytime I would get in the car and I would like put on the classic rock station where I was hearing this stuff for the first time, and he's like, this is I've been listening to this shit for 35 years.
Yep.
I don't like Slow Ride by Foghat. I've been listening since 1975.
Has never been good. Yeah, that's
that,
always
like
something.
I was going to say, you get that as you get older. It's like the things that you are familiar with are new to people.
Yes, but it's
and then
obvious
when they
to you.
they get excited about it, and you're like, yeah, whatever. But it's you.
Yeah,
everybody comes to things at different times. You know.
I always think that's a bad habit of mine. A little bit is that I'm. If I learn something, it can be a very little amount of time before it becomes like obvious to me, and I feel like a superiority complex to someone who's like, "Did you know that this happened?" And I'm like, "Of course I did, you fucking dunce!" Like, and I only read about it on Wikipedia that morning or something. But it's a flaw of the human condition, I think. I would be better served to not have that, but I do have it, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's like, how angry do I get about this younger person that's getting this Blade Runner trivia incorrect?
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's just you have to teach young people to just, nothing's like, don't be surprised. Like nothing's new here. So don't act like incredulous that this thing happened, because it's always been happening. Catcher in the Rye. The second one was, I read James and the Giant Peach, Roald Dahl.
How was that?
I loved Roald Dahl growing up, because the second one was you had to read a book with a color in the title, and peach counts. So I went with that.
Sure.
And then my third one, I haven't decided yet, but that's this month. But it's been good so far. So
Nice.
Anything you've been consuming or reading or whatever? Watching?
Been watching a lot of Murder, She Wrote. I'm 4 seasons into Murder, She Wrote. It's fucking great.
Nice.
It's it's a show that I remember watching when I was very, very young, but I just never, it was not available really to go back and watch.
My grandparents watched it all the time. My grandmother loved Murder, She Wrote.
It's great. It's a really good show. It's very formulaic, but it's very well done. The thing I find really funny about it is, especially in the early seasons, they really go out of their way to show Angela Lansbury like going on jogs and moving around a lot,
being
and also being very active, and also making sure that all the older men on the show desperately want to have sex with her, because it's like I can see that there's a producer somewhere who's like, listen, I'm weary enough about putting an old lady in the lead of this show. We need to give her something. Make the people want her, that she's not just an old lady. She's out there. She's moving. She's fucking,
She's got to be doing a lot of yoga in the park for people to be the young ones to be tuning in about this.
Yeah. I've also been I've been reading this book called The Death of WCW. About the wrestling company WCW, which is I've realized that the era of professional wrestling from like 1995 to 2002 is, to people of my age and interests, as like the Kennedy assassination is to a lot of people who from like baby boomers, because it's like there's always like a new book. It's like, oh shit, what are they going to say? What do they say about Sting this time? What's the new information about Ric Flair behind the scenes that we didn't know? What was Vince McMahon really doing while Eric Bischoff was doing this on the channel? And it's always interesting. It's just stupid as shit, but it's always, I don't know, reading the chronicles of a company that basically had the entire world in its palm until it just self-destructed is very fascinating.
We haven't talked about the Vince McMahon sex crimes or whatever, but it's a very good example of coverage from people who are seemingly unfamiliar with something but are talking about it, because those text messages, right? If you've ever watched McMahon perform as Mr. McMahon, that's how he writes those text messages. I didn't see them, but I can hear it in my head. I can hear the McMahon, the character, saying those text messages out loud. And it's like, that's what, I'm not sympathetic towards him, but it's kind of the thing of like, if he were to be like this crazy, like I'm in a adulterous relationship and I'm a crazy sex guy, I would expect him to write those text messages, honestly. Like it's one of these weird things of like, you kind of need to see it, but at the same time, I'm like, I don't feel this is fair to air these text messages so that people can see it, because what if this guy was just being Mr. McMahon in his sexual fantasy? It's like, that's what this is, really. It's very strange. Yeah, that stuff is very. But he writes text like a boomer. He does write text messages like like baby boomer parents do. Yeah. That stuff is really, really intense. Like that newest round of stuff is like, if like half of that stuff is true, that's yikes. Yeah. Yeah. Clearly not a good time. It's just whether it was that, I think John Laurinaitis, just him yelling at that guy like he's Mr. McMahon's character. It's very silly. Yeah, it's wild to me that he now has the mustache of the director. I can't remember the director. He's got the pencil thin mustache.
Oh,
of,
yeah. I think he lost the mustache at this point.
Has he? Who's the director? Yeah. The Underground. He's gay, right? He's the
John Waters.
John Waters.
Yes,
yeah.
John Waters mustache. Yeah, it was really weird how he got bounced from his own company, and then all of a sudden he dyed his white hair jet black and grew a really weird mustache. Like that should have been signal number one that maybe he needs to take a step back from things.
Yeah, yeah. Because Shane McMahon hasn't been around for a long time, right? He runs like a light bulb company or something.
He left for a number of years and then came back, and he was fairly prominent for maybe like 4 years, like
recently.
Like 2016 through 2020, 2021 kind of. And then he kind of left again, but yeah, I think it's Triple H and Stephanie are running the show. I think at this point, at least on the creative end, but.
Is what it is.
It's really like professional wrestling is such an unfortunate thing to enjoy because you don't even have to dig deep. You just need to scratch the surface, and you find some pretty horrible stuff about the industry, and just to see that it goes all the way to the top and that the people are who you think that they are is very disappointing.
Yeah. It's a I think it's an industry that seems to certain industries just seem to attract bad character people, and I think it's a lot of bad characters in the wrestling business for whatever reason, just from the McMahons on down.
I mean, I would like to. I'm going to give the more recent people the benefit of the doubt and say that. Hopefully the people it's attracting now are better caliber people, because I feel like it's the last handful of years, it's more people who love it for the sake of it rather than just doing it for money or whatever. But I mean, the history of it is just it's born out of the carnival. So like from the time it was created, it's based in deception and cheating people, and so it's not exactly the most doesn't have the best reputation from day one, unfortunately.
But it does this. It has this weird aspect to it, which is that like it's a sort of offshoot of like that kayfabe, right? They pronounce it kayfabe.
Sure.
So but like you'll see wrestlers talking about their career, and they'll be like, "I can't believe Vince didn't give me the championship that match," and it's like. You're aware this is fake, motherfucker, right? Like, there's no. I understand you're out there doing an athletic event, but there's no winning the championship. It doesn't mean anything to you. So why do you care about this?
It doesn't. It doesn't. Because it's
for their legacy. You think it matters?
Well, the belt is a prop, but it's an indication that you are the best at your job. Most of the time they try to give it to the people who are the best at it. And so, having a championship it's an indicator that they are willing to put the company on your back to a certain extent, which is, very flattering.
But doesn't just the decision is what makes the character in some ways. The decision to give them the belt over and over again is what enshrines them as a character. You know what I mean? Like,
sure.
There are other characters who have never won the belt who I will remember more than characters who have won the belt a lot.
Oh, definitely.
In wrestling.
Yeah. I mean, like Roddy Piper was never, I think he was the Intercontinental Champion briefly, but that's the only belt he ever won.
Or Mick Foley was once, right? Mick Foley won the championship belt once, I think.
Is it only once? Yeah.
Yeah, just when he beat The Rock or Triple H or whatever.
Yeah.
But he's much more memorable than Cena to me in some ways.
Sure.
And that's all personal opinion about like when I was watching and things like that. But I just think it's this weird reality of their entire industry is sort of a construct, but they treat it as if it's a very important reflection of them as a person when it's not really at all.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of like, it's kind of like if only one person got an Oscar and you could lose it to another person if your acting wasn't as good this year. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. It's a very arbitrary. It's
Right.
like, well, I think that I think that the latest Tom Cruise movie featured better acting. It's like, oh, how dare you say that about it is kind of
Tom
along those lines.
Cruise. Tom Cruise has the belt until Mission
Right.
Impossible comes out, and it doesn't. It was good, but it didn't draw as much money, and people kind of
right.
So then, okay,
We took it away from him.
Yeah. But it's one of the interesting things about the book is it does talk about how Hulk Hogan is probably the best politicker in wrestling history, based on how he managed to keep staying on top well past his expiration date.
Yeah.
They talk about some of the things that he pulled to stay there, and it's really interesting because it's a lot of things. It's politics, it's performance, it's Hulk Hogan doesn't become the character he does without the WWF, but at the same time, he doesn't become that character without him.
Yeah.
So when he moves forward, it's like he is enshrined as this legendary character. Then can it exist without the WWF behind it? How much of it is him? How much of it is him just being savvy enough to politic his way into positions? So it's very interesting. That's why it doesn't make me that. I know that they're trying to make a Hogan biopic. It doesn't make me that interested in that because I don't think they're going to really show that side of his character, if I had to guess.
Well, that's the other kind of weird thing about them is after they're out of the business, they're referred to as their character. Like they maintain the charade of being Hulk Hogan. Like there's
nobody calls Sting Gordon Sumner, But the musician Sting, not the
he's still Sting. He's still like even Dwayne Johnson tries to break it, but everyone goes, "That's The Rock." It's
right.
like it becomes what he is.
Yeah. It's just what people know you most by. Like if Michael Keaton decided he wanted to start going by his real name, Michael Douglas, I don't think anybody would go for it.
Well, no, but it would be more. It would be something like if Jason Alexander referred to himself as George Costanza outside of the show. He continued it. And he's like, "I'm George Costanza," actually, and it's like we're here interviewing George Costanza, and he went along with it.
I think it's closer to like Pee-wee, right? Or Elvira or Ernest or something like that, where like the line is blurry between is this a character on a show or is the character the performer, that kind of thing. The first time you go on a talk show in character, that it's over. That's who you are.
Yeah, you are them at that point. All right, everybody. I guess we're done with the post show. Thanks very much for listening. We'll be back next week with more Star Trek. Ron Horror continues. Badass will be back. All the stuff's at Patreon. Thanks very much for listening. See you later.